Hello, I'm MJ Simms-Maddox, author of the Priscilla series and a handbook for emerging and seasoned authors. Today, we are beginning session 2 on creative writing techniques taken from my handbook, starting on page 33. Have you started writing your first story? If so, who is speaking? From whose point of view do you want to draw in the readers? Can they see, hear, smell, or touch something that is happening? Does the first person narrator tell your story? If so, I is the focus of the narrative. In the handbook on page 33 is a homework assignment for you to begin reading the opening scenes in 5 novels. For example, one of the most compelling openings in a novel narrated in the first person is found in the first sentence in Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Ellison forces us to question what it means to be invisible. The universality of the subject comes to the fore in that anyone who has ever felt isolated or discriminated against for any reason can relate to the main character. The eye draws you in. Some 60 years later, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie evokes readers' perceptions while employing the third-person narrator in her story. She, her, or the character's name draws the reader in. The author, who is Nigerian, also creates in those opening scenes a place or a setting. I reference the author's nationality for you to know that creative writing standards are universal. More creative writing techniques are taken from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Did you know that before Tolkien wrote these works, he had had a successful career as a philologist? Imagine where we'd be today had not he studied language and culture all those many years, and we now know something called Middle Earth. So Tolkien used what we talked about in the first session, his skill set, his knowledge about language and culture, to write about what he knew. Back to the point of narrating, Tolkien used the omniscient point of view effectively throughout the novel, especially when Frodo's entourage makes its way across the bridge of Khazad-dûm. There is too much going on in the story for any other voice, certainly not the first or the third person, to narrate. Who, other than the omniscient, can know what someone is thinking? What is happening with characters that are somewhere other than that daunting bridge? So, if you are drafting a story with multiple characters and scenes, it might behoove you to consider employing the omniscient narrator, the all-knowing narrator, the all-knowing voice. Writing exercises are interspersed throughout the first part of the handbook. You can also earn extra credit. For example, I ask you to do an essay on Paula Hawkins' The Girl on the Train. How would you categorize her novel? Who is the narrator? Okay, that's enough about point of view. Let's turn now to plotting your story, which is explained in the handbook on pages 45 through 65. First, you need to set up a framework, okay, a working template for your manuscript. I suggest using Microsoft Word. However, you can use whatever software you prefer. So if you're just getting started, keep in mind that the front matter, that's the title page, the copyright page, etc., are single-spaced. Then when you get ready to tell your story, whether you begin with a preface or a prologue or chapter 1, double space your text. Double space your text. and use an eye-friendly font such as Times New Roman, or whichever one you want, but make it eye-friendly. Then, in a separate file, create what we call profiles for your characters. Profiles for your characters. In creating your characters, you oftentimes create material that you can use in your plots. Check out the character profiles that I created for Priscilla, and Priscilla engaging in the game of politics, and her boss, Senator Callahan. That's found on pages 45 through 48. In naming characters, be careful. You've got to name your main character or protagonist and all supporting characters. John, Jane, and Sue are not appropriate names for all characters. John, Jane, and Sue do not fit names of people and nationalities other than here in America. If you're in Saudi Arabia, if you're in Zimbabwe, if you're in Russia, if you're in Brazil, use names for characters that suit that culture. Use names for characters that suit that culture. Remember, the protagonist or the main character is key. The protagonist or the main character is key. So create a character or protagonist with whom your readers can relate. Whether they like them or not, that's not the point. Can they relate to your main character? Show what happens along the character's journey. Don't jump from A to G to Z. Fill in the spaces and the blanks between A and Z. Okay? This is not C-spot run. Okay, you're doing creative writing. The character has to C-spot and C-spot running. So don't say C-spot run, show spot running. Of course, you need to also select the point of view or the narrator, which we already discussed. Did I mention that you can use more than one point of view? So you can go from first person to omniscient. Okay, you can go from omniscient back to first or third person. Use your initial ideas to create the sections and the scenes and the chapters in your story. Use your initial ideas. After you map them out, you can always go in, revise, and change them, which brings us to plot development. This is too big a subject to cover in this particular session, but we'll give you some idea what you need to take into consideration. What is your story about? Okay, what is the story about? You need to think about that. In so doing, create what we call a storyboard. And you might want to get out what we people from the old school call lots of sheets of paper and start jotting down what you want to happen in this chapter, what you want to happen in that chapter, or what do you want to happen in key scenes along the way. And post those on a board in the room where you work. Okay? Or you can use index cards or whatever. But you've got to create a storyboard to help guide you through this. For the record, however, I am a pen and paper person. Okay? I write in longhand on legal pads. Then I go to my laptop and I type my notes, which brings me more ideas. As I'm typing the notes from my legal pad, more ideas come to me, strengthening my storyline. I hardly ever use an outline, okay, or a storyboard. I just keep moving my pen across the page as the words flow from my head. Not all authors can write like that. Do create an outline and or a storyboard to help you along the way. In my particular case, I reference country and western singer Hank Williams, who once said, "God gives me the words, I just write them down." Okay, let's move on. We're still creating plot. You must create conflict for your character. Okay, you must create conflict for your character. We don't just want to see Spot run. What is causing Spot to run? From or to? Or why is Spot running? This subject is elaborated also extensively in the handbook. But you've got to create some intrigue and some suspense to keep the narrative flowing. Put your protagonist in the corridors of political power. I say political power because most of my novels have political plots. Whatever your theme is, you need to consider the setting, and the reader needs to see the setting, okay? In, I think my first novel, Priscilla Engaging in the Game of Politics, the principal setting is the Ohio Senate. Priscilla works for a senator. Show her at her desk, in the corridors, interacting with other staff. Show other senators, show how the Senate operates. And then, of course, when you get to the climax of whatever is happening in your story, the reader is with you. The reader is with you. Let's look at some other novels and the scenes or the settings that they have. For Michael Ondaatje, Count Laszlo de Amacy in The English Patient, the principal setting is the desert. It's the desert, the Gil el Kibir Desert. Okay, that's a desert plateau in Egypt. So for The English Patient, it's a desert. And for, what's its name? Stieg Larsson, who did The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and played with fire and kicked the hornet's nest. There are several things that you can pick, but I like the farmhouse. I like her father's farmhouse, the one in Sweden. It's just etched in my mind because that one scene toward the end of the second one with the girl that played with fire and that axe that she used, it's all very vivid and clear, okay? Pick your settings well and describe them. Show the setting to the reader. Also back to Tolkien, when Frodo and his entourage are crossing that daunting bridge, who can forget that? Who can forget that scene? So make sure that you pick a good scene and that you develop it for the readers to appreciate. Finally, the title of your book and the chapter headings come last. The title of your book and chapter headings tend to come last. I give lots of examples in the handbook, and hopefully, you will appreciate the examples that are given. Let me share at least one with you. With, I think it is Special Envoy. Yes, with Special Envoy, the fourth novel, where Priscilla journeys into Arab Islamic territory. That title, well, the first part, Special Envoy, came to me early on. And by the time the story was completed, it was clear. The title would be Special Envoy. But I didn't think that people would know what Special Envoy was about, so I subtitled it Priscilla Journeys into Arab Islamic Territory. You have to think about that. You have to think about that. Hopefully you've learned something today about creative writing techniques, but if you're scratching your head, perhaps you need to purchase some reference tools that deal with standards for creative writing and give some serious thought to enrolling in a creative writing class at the local community college where you are. In the next session, we begin to delve into the 7 steps and detailed procedures essential to becoming a published author. That material is very technical. Very technical. That's where we talk about everything from a professional headshot to an ISBN, price barcodes, and so on. So mark the pages in your book where if you're already reading that section, and be prepared when we talk about the 7 steps toward becoming a published author in the next session. For now, take care. Bye-bye.